therapy is making this generation a soft generation. Religion is losing value. Most of the West considers religion to be superstition. Even though I say that the problem is not that big, the problem is still there. I want Gen Z and the generation after that to think of what is coming next. If it is taking the happiness of that specific society away, it has to be defeated. Can we again resort to religion and what religion brings to life? That's my question. Hey everyone, welcome to Abraham's Global Insights, the podcast where we dive deep into powerful ideas, global perspectives, and transformative insights that shape our world. I'm truly grateful that you're here, and I appreciate you investing your time in learning and growing. Whether you're driving to work, unwinding at home, hitting the gym, or just taking a moment for yourself, this is your space to gain new perspectives and challenge the way you see the world. I bring you insights from books, podcasts, interviews, and in-studio conversations with incredible guests, so there is always something new to learn. If you enjoy the show, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now let's dive in. So, I had a very difficult upbringing, being the first of 7 children and actually living in a household where around 10 people lives, but it's just one room. We had difficulties with everything. Maybe most of the times we would eat once or twice a day and we wouldn't complain about it because that was the norm. That was how the neighbors around there used to do it, and we used to do it the same way. But we were a lot in the family, and our number was really bad for the survival of the family because we'd have a food of some sort, but it wouldn't be okay talking about a portion. It would be very little, and people would complain. The kids, so my brothers and sisters, my siblings would complain. I'm mentioning this not as a complaint. I'm not complaining about that because that contributed to who I am today. That gave me the strength, the resilience I needed in life, and I made it through the difficult times. Here I am today. I'm so happy about that. But during those days, it was really tough for most of us here in the towns of Ethiopia and the cities of Ethiopia. I was brought up in one of the biggest cities. Compared to others, it's maybe the second or the third biggest city in Ethiopia, but we didn't have all the means to eat or to have comforts in life, let alone thinking about cars or other luxuries. It was unthinkable. Nobody thought of it that way. So I'm mentioning all this not because I have this bad feeling about those days. Rather, I think of those days with nostalgia and love. We had that cohesion of family. We had that conversation every day, every night. We knew who was going through what, and we knew what kind of solution is to be provided by the parents, my father and my mother, and what is happening in the lives of everyone. I'm very glad about that life. I'm so happy that I went through all that. I cherish it. Outside the house, we had difficulties as well. Like the basic needs, the basic necessities like clothes or shoes were not there. I would have one shoe for a year, and whatever happens to that shoe, that's it. I maintain it, or I prefer to play football with it, and it gets torn apart. That's it. I get with it. That was life. That was a life for my friends, myself, my siblings. Everywhere in the surrounding, in the vicinity was the same. So I have kids of mine now. I buy shoes, I buy clothes. And I remember the other day feeding my kid started complaining about one thing. So he came to whisper in my ears and telling me that the help in the house was force feeding him. I laughed. I really laughed because nobody in my family or nobody from my relatives know about what force feeding is. Again, I'm an Ethiopian. I'm an African. I'm not complaining about it. That contributed to who I am today. The reason I'm mentioning all these things is because I came across a podcast video by Chris Williamson from the podcast Modern Wisdom. I like that guy. He's a great interviewer. He's a great person. I really admire him. I admire his approach. So he had a guest, Freya, India, a very young girl, a lady, maybe 25 or 26 years old. And she was talking about issues in the current generation and the generation before it, the Gen Z. She was focusing on Gen Z and what Gen Z is doing now. And a lot of things, I was really confused. I know what is happening around us. I know how social media is impacting our lives, but I didn't understand the extent of the impact of social media that way. I was confused. So I had to research who Freya India is and what the issue that she was talking about is and the depths of the issue. I had to dig deep, and I came across a book by Jonathan Haidt that says The Anxious Generation. So I read the book. I liked it, but I was still confused because whatever is written in the book, actually the book is written in 2024, and what she was talking about and the points, the issues, the alarming issues that she was mentioning are not my realities. So let me tell you what confused me about her analysis, her argument. She was talking about people, the Gen Z, Generation Z, Gen Zs, depending on whatever the social media prescribes to survive in life. She was mentioning and talking about therapy and how therapy is making this generation a soft generation. So resilience is not there, she was claiming. This generation is not resilient in terms of surviving, in terms of actually facing the difficulties in life. So the generation resorts to an easy answer, a way out to overcome problems in life. I understood that. I really understand it. I somehow have this idea that people in this generation, in Gen Z, don't have that mentality of toughness, community, resilience, and things of that nature. But I also understand that Gen Z, or the people that she is talking about, have other qualities. These people are innovators, entrepreneurs, kids that are actually thriving in different arenas, according to Africa or according to Ethiopia. So my confusion came from the fact that because of the reality on the internet, the reality from the social media, there are things happening. The adverse effect of the social media is causing a lot of things to happen. For example, fatalities. Because kids in the social media compare themselves to other people, other personalities, celebrities in the social media. And when they realize that their life is not as fancy, as beautiful, as glamorous as what they see in the social media, so they are resorting to, bad things that affects their lives, their survivals. So I went to Jonathan's book, The Anxious Generation, to make sure if this young lady is talking about the real thing, or if she has foundation about the issues that she's discussing about. I had my own confirmation bias. I had my own understanding as to what she was talking about, because I grew up in that generation, the generation before Gen Z. I'm a millennial. I have that understanding of the millennial mindset that survival or toughness, facing difficulties is everything for success in life. So that was a confirmation bias I'm talking about. I have that. And she was actually supporting, she was actually reaffirming my confirmation bias that people have to be tough. People have to face their challenge, not resort to simple things or be soft in life. So I went to the book and tried to read between the lines and try to understand what his prescriptions are for this generation. So what actually Jonathan Haidt says is akin to advocating that we have to return back to where we were before, where people were strong, where kids used to play outside, kids used to face their adversities or whatever bad things coming to their life in person. Face it, overcome it, then they win in life. So the current generation, he says, is not doing all this because the current generation of the Gen Z has everything at the tip of his finger or her finger. They don't need to go out, or they don't need to see what the real world looks like, because their community is in their phones. So social media and the smartphone brought this calamity to this generation. And we have to, his prescription is, we have to really see into it and find a solution to the problems that social media and the internet as a whole, as well as the smartphones, are bringing to the generation now, the adverse effect of all these things. What are the things that he talks about? What really are those things? Are they applicable to the setting in Africa, the setting in the third world countries, the poor nations or the least developed countries, or not? Is debatable issue, something that we can debate about. But I have my own arguments that those issues, those problems that he is talking about in the book, the anxious generation, most of them do not apply to the setting of Africa, do not apply to the poor countries, because mostly in the continent of Africa, or particularly in a country like Ethiopia, what we use, especially in the rural areas of Ethiopia, what we use smartphones or the internet is actually to communicate with other people, to communicate with our family members, the community, and to do business, to do side hustles, to do things of that sort. But I'm not claiming that the problem is not totally not there, because in the cities, I see people being affected in that way, but the seriousness of the issue is not the same way as both Freya and Jonathan Haidt claim in the book, The Anxious Generation. I really like the fact that Jonathan Haidt advocates for people to go outside, to play, to face their demons. The demons being the difficulties in life or the bad things that are happening in everyday life. People have as ideas that in the outside, in the real world, there are predators preying on their kids or their children. So it's not a good advice that Jonathan Haidt advises for people to go outside and to interact, to create that community. But my understanding, my assumption is the predators in the internet, the predators in the social media are way severe, way powerful, way fatal than the ones out in the outside world. So I agree with him saying or advocating for playing outside, having that life, experiencing all kinds of difficulties in person, then overcoming the problems that we have in life, so that at later stage, we don't become that soft to actually seek for support from therapy or something like that. I'm not against saying therapy is totally bad, or as a whole therapy is bad. That's not my claim. So before I finish talking about the book and what the prescriptions from the book are, let me come to Freya India and what she says about Gen Z and how Gen Z is dependent on therapy. Let's watch the video first.
I do think this is kind of a cliche thing to say now, but I do think therapy culture has replaced religion. And that's not a new thing to say. People have been saying that for a long time. But in recent years, since social media, I would say therapy culture has just escalated to the point where they just see that as kind of life. So they interpret everything through this therapeutic lens. So their lives, their relationships, their emotions. And I think it has elevated to the level of religion. So instead of praying, we just repeat our positive affirmations. Instead of seeking salvation, you'll go on a healing journey. Instead of resisting temptation from the devil, you'll reframe your intrusive thoughts. This kind of therapeutic worldview has completely replaced that void.
So you saw that religion is losing value. Communal life, or depending on the community, on the parents, depending on authorities, is losing value. What can we do about it? She's telling us that whatever people the Gen Z can find from therapy, which is prevalent in the social media, we can find it from religions, or we can find it from traditional practices. These traditional practices can be found in different forms, and they can come from different places. But my argument is, in the experience of life, how people, both all generations, experience life as individualists, in the West, can we again resort to religion and what religion brings to life? That's my question. Maybe this can be a reality, or this can be true for us in Africa, for the people living in the third world nations, because mostly these people depend on the unknown God, depend on their religion. The prescription mostly they get is from their priests or their religious teachers. Can it work for the West as well? Because the West considers, that's my understanding, that's not a stereotype, or I don't have any kind of bias towards the belief of the West. But if the movies I watch or the TV shows that I watch can be a testament to this, the West considers religion, most of the West considers religion to be superstition. So, can the West find salvation from a religion? That's a question I have. I'm so glad that she asked the West, or the kids, the generation, the Gen Zs, to resort to religion and instead of resorting to therapy. I know where she is coming from. But can we really brainwash, or can we actually inculcate the idea that religion has a solution? A better solution than therapy? I doubt that. I like to again come to the point that I mentioned about my life, or the lives of the friends I had growing up. We faced difficulties. And different times these difficulties were there. We didn't know what to do about any of them because we had no idea what tomorrow would bring. Life unfolded in a way it did, but our reaction to it was being indifferent because we didn't have the means to change anything in our lives. But we were laughing, we were interacting, we were doing all the chores that were expected of us. Knowingly or unknowingly, we admired the values of the society that we lived in. Can we expect all these things from this generation? Poverty is still there. A struggle in life is still there, especially for African countries or the countries that the UN calls the least developed countries. There's development, but development does not affect positively the lives of everyone. It affects the lives of finger-counted people, finger-counted members of the society. So the struggle that I faced, or my friends faced, is still there. But people in this part of the world are resorting to solutions not from the internet or not from social media, but in the ways the solutions are actually coming from social media or the smartphones. So let me go back to the prescription by Jonathan Haidt from the book The Anxious Generation. The solutions or the prescriptions that are given in there are related to limiting the screen time for the kids. I have a question. These young people who have privacy, who have individual lifestyle, I assume that they have their own room, their own, facilities in their house. So who's going to dictate that they watch this thing and not the other, and they watch it for this number of time or this limited amount of hours? I don't think that's really attainable. I don't think that's going to happen or that's going to work for the people living in that side of the world. And the other prescription is, he says schools have responsibilities. This responsibility relates to the fact that when the kids of the Gen Zs take their phones to the schools should either take their phones away or rather give them their phones for a limited amount of time. I don't think that will work as well, because families do have different interests. They want to know where their kids are. They want to know what their kids are doing. So rather than limiting the screen time of the kids that are going to school with their phones, they would rather know what their kids are doing in their school, and know that they're there. But still, if policies or if regulations can be actually written in that way and ratified in some way, for that effect, that would be fantastic. But let's see that argument from the angle of the kids. I mean, this kid, 14 or 15 years old, going to school, they have their understanding of the world. Their understanding of the world is through the lens of social media. Their interaction is not a physical interaction, it's a digital interaction. So when the school tries to impose this law, I don't think it would be accepted by the kids. They would find another way to avoid whatever prescription is there. And there is another prescription, or another solution that Jonathan Haidt says should work. The social media giants and the governments should intervene, because the generation that is facing the difficulty will be actually the next generation that will be leading a country or leading a nation. So we come to the argument that a generation that is soft will breed a generation, an economy or a country that is weak. And a weak economy, a weak country cannot survive, so that cycle will go on. So these are the arguments that are made in there. I see the confusion. I have it too. We like to use the benefit of we like to benefit from social media. As I've told you earlier, in this part of the world, in Africa, we're conducting business using it. If you go to Kenya, for example, or if you come to Ethiopia, people conduct different businesses using their social media. We pay for things using apps in our phones, in our smartphones. So for us, it's not really a solution to take the smartphone away or to go back to the generation or the places that we've been before. Because in most of the countries, in the least developed countries, development is related to having internet and infrastructure, or infrastructures related to ICT or things of that nature. So it will not work for us that way. Besides, the virtues that we value are still there, especially in the countrysides of the countries in Africa. I can talk about Ethiopia and I can be confident about this fact that the virtues are still there. Family is respected. We're somehow still dominated by the notion of the father being the breadwinner of the family and the mother being the housemaker or running the house. We still have the idea, we still have the respect that elders in the community dictate what happens around that community. It's not about only the government, or it's not about only the conventional government, but we have governments of our own in our societies. These are our parents. These are the community elders. I'm not saying, again, this is true everywhere within the continent. So I want to relate this to the fact that Freya India claims or says the kids, the Gen Zs that are receiving their information, their livelihood, the picture of the understanding of the world from social media are living in that world. And what they think is a reality is only found in that world. And I believe the solutions that they try or they talk about in the podcast here are really valid solutions. But can we apply them? For example, Chris Williamson in the podcast claims that manhood in the lanes of experiencing stoicism or in the lanes of experiencing being a sports person is actually still valued. Is that our reality? There are pills that she mentions in the podcast that these kids are taking to be considered smart or to be considered hot. Are the parents aware? Is the government in their countries aware that these kids are taking those pills? I don't know. But let me tell you one experience I have. I have a job that takes me to different parts of the world. I travel a lot. I meet people. I cherish the fact that I have this opportunity to meet people from different backgrounds and different perspective of life than I have. And in some places where the looks I see, I understand now that those looks are appealing for the community or the society there, but those looks that are actually generated by plastic surgery and things of that nature, as a traditional man, I don't think are appealing. That's my thought. So they talk about this in this episode. So if those looks are not appealing for the ordinary person or the individuals living in the real life, they're not doing it for them. All those things, all the pain that they had to pass through is for the social media, for the TikToks, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, and the others. That is what is happening in there. So let me try to come up with a solution, rather a suggestion. This is my understanding that going back is not going to happen. It's not going to work because Gen Z started the life that it knows with a phone, a smartphone. So taking that away is like taking a lifeline. But what the West can do, I believe, is try to glamorize the traditions, some of the traditions that are valuable. For example, as I see, influencers are doing much in the space of glamorizing ideals from the East, be it Stoicism or some notion of a religion. I think we better try that, because what I understand and what I know is when the West wants to glamorize something, it knows how to package it because it has the propaganda machines, and now there is social media that can do a lot to help in that regard. Let's glamorize those ideals. Let's try to think of coming up with a better idea to replace what is a fantasy, what is really not a reality in the social media world. In terms of conclusion, Jonathan Haidt in the book The Anxious Generation tries to come up with ideas by telling us that social media is killing everything that we keep dear to our heart, close to our heart. But I believe it's already too late. Reversing that and forcing kids to go outside and to play is not going to happen unless it's going to be considered as some kind of fashion or some kind of modern day, prestige. That will not happen. Again, there is that distinction that Jonathan Haidt is making in the book, that the problem for the boys is not the problem for the girls. What the girls are facing is not faced by the boys. The boys exercise their social media discretions or powers in terms of playing games. He claims that they want to portray the life that they see in the games, and they watch a lot of porn. I don't want to demonize or glamorize any of the practices, the two practices, but a kid who's actually spending the night playing a game, if he's asked to go to school or to go to work or to spend time with his friends or to know about the community, his community or his surroundings, won't say, all right. We need to understand and we need to actually see a better way for that, or find a solution for that as well. It is fantastic to create that world of heroes, that world of soldiers protecting their countries. And I really admire that part of America, part of the Western world is trying to do that, but it's only part of that. I really admire the fact that most podcasts that I watch really glamorize these SEAL team members or elite fighters. That's fantastic. But that only works for a portion of the society. You need to come up with another solution for that. And for girls, he says, it's about image issue. A kid, maybe between the age of 14 and 18, sees a Kim Kardashian, one of those sisters, and try to emulate what they do and goes through the surgeries and the plastic surgeries and do all kind of things. That person still feels inadequate about everything that she does, because the reality is not there. So it's about that image issue. How can you curb that problem? How can you address that problem? Unless that individual is late to know her real value, her real worth in accordance with the values of the community that she is living in. Now the community that she is living in is called social media community. And that social media community really values what she did on her body. So still, that difficulty persists. Coming to the part of Freya India, and she actually refers to Jonathan Haidt and his works in her different conversations. And by that, I understand that she respects his works and she admires him. She says that individuals, or this generation is actually supported, or actually encouraged to see inwards, not see outside. The inwards looking mentality, or the inwards looking understanding of the world is making that person selfish, she claims. Is making that person believe in finding a solution by himself, not from the community, not from the surroundings. The way I understand the Western world, that's how it is. I don't have an issue with that. But the West should try those strong values of the East, or of solidarity that it has in the elite forces. I really appreciate those. Let me come to our issue with regard to these points, and let me conclude. Even though I say that the problem is not that big in Africa or in Ethiopia or in the third world countries, the problem is still there. We're not denying it. I'm not denying it. So what we have to do is actually understand the problem and contextualize it to our situations. Contextualize it in terms of understanding whether it can be business or not, understanding whether we can find our happiness from that or not, understanding whether or not this disrupts the way we live or disrupts what we value daily or not. We don't have the luxury to say that we're not using it, or we're not using any kind of social media platforms because it has that adverse effect for kids living in this part of the country or in this part of the city. We don't have that luxury because we're doing a lot using it. We're harnessing the benefit, and we're reaping actually a great benefit out of it. So contextualizing the problem and actually bringing it to our situation so that we can find a solution to the problem part of it is the best way to go about it. Let me conclude. I went through those problems. My friends went through those problems. We made it. We think of ourselves as resilient, as thriving, as winning in life. We respect our society. We love our country. We want to contribute. We want to give. I want that to happen. I want that to perpetuate. I want Gen Z and the generation after that to think of what is coming next. What is coming after them? I know it could be somehow a cringe idea to preach this kind of notions. But I don't care whether it's cringe or not. If it is killing you, if it is taking the happiness of the family away, if it is taking the happiness of that specific society away, it has to be defeated. It has to be curbed. That's a problem. So you need to really understand what the problem is and address it. If you can find solace, or if you can find some kind of comfort from watching TikTok the whole day. That's not okay. You need to actually examine the whole thing. Because as a country, we don't have that luxury. As a society, we don't have that luxury to lose an individual to a non-living entity. We cannot afford that. We're people of communal living. We're collectivists. That's in our DNA. When we have a problem, we win it by coming together. We win it in unison. So, however cringy it is, I like to say this again. If you think, or if the family or the society thinks that this is taking away the basic values or virtues we have, there needs to be a measure. But the measure has to be contextualized, though, has to be really as for what is really necessary, because it can affect a lot of things. Know that we're not using social media only for those purposes. We use social media to learn, to get education, to understand the world, to meet with our friends, our relatives living in different parts of the world. But if that is deemed to be problematic, we need to find a solution. So I'm so glad that my kid is of a faith. He's whispering into my ears and telling me that the help in the house is feeding him a lot of food. I'm so glad that is happening, that I overcame the problem that I had. I want to maintain the sanity of my kid. I want him to see the world as it is and benefit out of everything that he can benefit from. I want my kid to go out and play and do all kind of things, bruise himself and come to the house and learn that it is life. We can be redeemed. Africa can be redeemed. The third world nations can be redeemed. And the West needs to find a solution for this as well. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.